Just a brief announcement. Mr. Gaius of the Planning Board just wanted the body to know that, see if I got this right from memory, there will be an information session and Q&A on the new MBTA zoning law passed by the state at the Council on Aging, I think May 18, ma'am, at 7 p.m. So information presentation and opportunity for citizens to engage and ask questions. Get all that right, Mr. Gaius? Very good. Okay, I've been advised by the clerk that we have a quorum. Thank you for coming back. At this point, we're ready to go to Article 32. Yes, sir. Can we get your mic on? Actually, you know what? I could pause, sir. I forgot. We're going to try to run a test vote on clickers. We could just pause and make sure our clickers are okay. So, folks, again, instructions again. If everyone could get your clicker out, we'll run another test vote and make sure we don't get any red lights. Everybody's ready? Okay, if we could open up the poll. Again, 1 for yes, 2 for no, 3 for abstain.
One, two.
Now, sir, thank you for your patience. You're recognized. Oh, actually, let me get this out. It looks like, anybody have any problem with clickers? I see one. Okay, we'll wait for the member. Rob, we have one coming over on your left. Any other problem with clickers? Okay. How's everybody doing? Tired? Yeah. Yes. Well, that's handling. I was at a mass moderators meeting on Sunday, and I met a gentleman who'd been moderator for 40 years. Small town, open town meeting. And he said, it took me about 10 years to kind of get the hang of it. And I said, well, how many town meetings do you have a year? He said, well, 1. How many nights are they? Well, 1. So I think I got 5 years of experience coming up tonight, thanks to this process. Let alone the 16 before this, but anyways. All right, with that, clicker's okay. Yes, sir, you're recognized.
Thanks, Mr. Moderator. Nick Tagney, Precinct Member, Town 3. I appreciate your time prior to the meeting to clarify some of the policies. I have, I guess, two questions that I'm hoping you could explain to the body. One is, I'd like to reopen the question last night. I understand I do not have standing because I voted against the motion and I need to be voting in favor of it to reopen the item. I also would primarily like to protest the vote with the standing based on the rules that you described for us last Monday. I understand because we had a motion to adjourn, that's also not possible. I was hoping that you could explain to the body both of those points because I, for one, am disappointed that we didn't get to see the process to conclusion. I think the motion to adjourn came awfully quickly in a very chaotic environment. And I'm hoping you could explain to the body so that everybody has that same transparency that you were generous enough to share with me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Tangi. So there were 2 questions the gentleman raised. Last night, after we had adjourned the meeting for the evening, a member came up to me and said that they had stood and believed there were at least 7 people who had stood calling for what we used to call the standing count, which now under our temporary rule would have displayed the list of voters and how you all, the members and how you all voted. And they're asking, well, since they were missed last night, or I missed them, or I wasn't aware they were standing, in the sudden adjournment and everyone rising and exiting, shouldn't they have an opportunity to rise now as 7 and then run the count? So I consulted with town council and I consulted actually with Mr. Walsh to see, do we have any experience of ever having a standing count on a subsequent night after we'd had an adjournment? And in my experience, I've never seen that. Mr. Walsh has never seen that as a moderator. He had no further recollection of that in his history as a town meeting member. Second, when I spoke to town council, Although you are still town meeting members, the body is different. I don't know who actually stood up, who didn't. I'm not saying anyone is dishonest, I just don't know, and neither do you. Third, the motion to adjourn is one of the primary motions of town meeting. It's one of the top three. When it happens, as soon as it's seconded, it is not debatable, and we must immediately go to a vote, and we did. And so in my view, that last night's vote stands, and I will not permit now 7 members to rise and protest last night's vote. Now, the second question is, can we reopen 31? Now, traditionally, it's been fairly simple. We just have to have a member come up and say, I'd like to reopen 31. There's a second. If we're within an hour of the article, it only takes a majority vote. If it's more than an hour, it takes 2/3. But when we've been running on a voice vote for almost all of our history, we could never tell who was a proponent and opponent. And one of the rules of town meeting time is only a proponent may reopen an article. So if it would take someone who voted, one of the 2/3 of you that voted last night for the article, to come down and make a motion to reopen, and then there could be a second and we could have a vote on reopening. So that's why Mr. Tangi, I think we could check, but I believe he was not one of the proponents, so I could not honor his motion to reopen 31. But in the interest of being fair, we can check the vote from last night. Is there a member who voted for 31 last night that wishes to make a motion to reopen 31? Thank you. Seeing that, my ruling would then be that the vote last night was closed. I'm sorry we missed 7 people standing up. I'm sorry? Yeah. Raise his hand for. Okay, could you just come to a quick microphone and just introduce yourself?
I'm Paul Needham. I'm a town meeting member from Precinct 3. I voted in favor of the article last night, and I moved to reopen Article 31.
Okay. I'll be thorough. We'll just check the log. Thank you, Mr. Needham. Is there a second? Second. Right. If you'll pause for a minute, let me just check the log and make sure we're thorough so that there's no. I'll verify that, but while I'm doing that, I'll just have town council check, and I'll go look at the log. Thank you. That's what I'm just going to confirm with town council, make sure I'm on solid ground. So, thank you.
Hey, Kevin.
Thank you. Just to be clear, we did check, and Mr. Needham was a yes vote last night, so he complies with that rule. We've checked that in town meeting time. Town council and I have both looked, and we see no requirement that the second must be a proponent. So at this point, we have a motion to reconsider that's been made and seconded. Let me just check one thing. I think
Point of order, Mr.
Yes, sir,
Moderator.
Mr. Hart.
You said earlier it was a majority vote?
I'm just checking. I think it's a majority vote because we're within an hour of when we closed 31. And one of our rules say the clock stopped last night at whatever it was, 11:30, and just restarted at 7:30. If it's more than an hour, it's 2/3.
That's not how I read Chapter 2, Section 6 of the bylaws. And I'm happy to read it, and maybe my interpretation is incorrect. No vote shall be reconsidered at the same meeting except upon a motion made within 1 hour of adoption of such vote, unless ordered by 2/3 of the town.
I will double check that. Hey, Mr. Walsh, could you join me for a minute? Thank you. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I've consulted a few things. I've talked to Mr. Walsh about his 14 years of experience. I just consulted with Mr. Freitag. Mr. Freitag actually has the bylaws here. And here's the language from the bylaw, which varies slightly from the language that we read. So this is in section 6, chapter 2, it's on page 9. No vote shall be reconsidered at the same meeting except upon a motion made within 1 hour of the adoption of such vote, unless ordered by 2/3 of the town meeting members present and voting thereon. And then it says, provided that the time which shall elapse between any adjournment and the next calling to order of the meeting following such adjournment shall be excluded in computing the hour since the adoption of said vote. If I go to town meeting time, it reports that a reconsideration is just a majority vote. So in the interpretation of the three of us, this would require a majority vote to reconsider unless an hour had passed since 11:30 last night, which would be 8:30 tonight. So since we are within that hour, we will require, since we've had a motion made and seconded, will require a majority vote to reconsider. Yes, sir. Mr. Chinman?
Am I correct that only people who voted last night can vote on this, the motion to reopen?
I do not believe that is correct. I believe any town meeting member may vote.
Vote by the members present and voting thereon.
I believe that refers to the members that are present and voting thereon tonight on the motion to reconsider. That is my I understand your point. That's my interpretation of the language. That was a good point of order. Thank you. Are there any other questions or points?
Point of order.
Yes, sir. Is there an attorney in the house? Yes.
Peter Obersheimer, town meeting member 6. Peter Obersheimer, town meeting member precinct 6. I just had a clarifying question about the first sentence of chapter 2, section 6, which begins with, as you read, no vote shall be reconsidered at the same meeting, comma, except upon, and then it continues. So I just want to understand what we mean by the same meeting. And it goes to the point about, I understand the section about the adjournment clock ticking, but it goes to the comment that I think you recited from town council about, different body article closing. And I'm just not sure we're now at the same meeting, same body as yesterday's vote.
No, another good question. You may notice that within town meeting, I call for an adjournment, but not a dissolution. So we dissolve town meeting at the end, and then all our business is closed. And then the select board would have to start again with a new town meeting. So we just adjourned, which is a suspension of the same town meeting until we get to dissolution.
Got it. Thank you.
So with that, let me just check one thing. Mr. Freitag, would you like this back? So this is, we should be fast, not debatable, not amendable, only requires a majority vote. We'll use the devices.
Sorry, point of order?
Yes, ma'am.
Question for clarification, Mr. Moderator.
Yes, please.
So it sounded like our bylaws said the 2/3 vote and town meeting time says majority. Does town meeting time trump our bylaws? Or am I misunderstanding?
Our bylaws trump town meeting time.
And I thought it was our bylaws that said it requires a 2/3 vote.
Specifically, the bylaw said that within an hour, the interpretation of the three of us, within an hour, it's a majority, which is what town meeting calls for. Beyond an hour, it's 2/3.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you. These are good points of order. Any other questions? I'm just trying to play by the rules, folks, and best we can. Very good. Do we have our clickers ready? Ready. We have one member who's ready. Very good. And we have the software up. So this is a motion to reconsider. Very good. You are voting to reconsider Article 31. So right now it's closed. If you vote yes, we will reopen Article 31. If you vote no, we will not, and I'll go to Article 32. So 1 to reopen, 2 to move on to 32, 3 to abstain. Clear? Very good. Thank you, sir. Let's open the poll. The poll's open. Let's see if it, so you stopped the poll, okay. Any other problems with clickers? I'm sure. Okay, you ready, Mr. Mallett? Let's reopen, please. 1 to reopen 31, 2 to not do that and go to 32, 3 to abstain. The motion to reconsider fails. We'll move on to Article 32. Now, on Article 32, yes, ma'am?
I have a question.
Is it a point of order?
I don't know.
Okay, once you stand up, please, to the mic, and we'll find out. If you could be brief.
Thank you. Hi, Georgia Lee, Precinct 9. We have seen a lot of clickers not work, and this offers us less transparency in that when we say words, we hear each other, and we know how we are voting. In the absence of a verbal vote, we are offered 100% transparency because these can all be vetted after the fact. We can all see how we voted or how this device thinks we voted after the fact. So my question is, are these votes published? And if so, how? And if not, how do we know that our vote was counted? Thank you.
Yes, we will. We have a record in the files of every single vote. We have not had time to publish every one. We want to format the report correctly. So at the conclusion of town meeting, we will publish on the town website for all to see the record of how you all voted on every single article.
Amazing. Thank you.
Okay. We don't get that very often, as a moderator. So, I will take it. I've been advised by the warrant committee that they have adopted a new recommendation for Article 32, which we can put up. It's some language to make it consistent with Article 31. Yes, ma'am. This is Dylan, I think, right?
Thank you. Just a point of order. We've skipped 30, so I just wanted to see if we were going to go to 32 now or if we're going back to 30.
We voted on Monday to move 31 and 32
Oh.
Thursday together.
Excuse me, I didn't realize we moved 32. Thank you.
So Article 32. So I will, I'll read this in because, and let you see the changes up there. We've got them redlined. Hopefully you can see the text. So recommended that, and then the next nearly 4 lines are deleted. Recommended that the town vote to authorize the Select Board to acquire for school purposes by purchase, taking by eminent domain or otherwise, a portion of parcels of land owned by the town of Milton and located off Guile Road and Blue Hills Parkway, said portion constituting approximately 7.21 acres, which parcels are shown on the town of Milton's assessor's maps as Map D, Block 65, Lot 6A and 6B, as shown on plans, copies of which are on file at the Office of the Director of Planning and Community Development, and in consideration, therefore, to transfer the following land to the Conservation Commission, which are also shown on plans, copies of which are on file at the Office of the Director of Planning and Community Development. Then bullet points 1 are unchanged. Bullet point 2 is unchanged. Bullet point 3 is unchanged. Pardon me? All right, I will look at the screen to see what you're seeing. Could we scroll back up a little bit? You're right, I was wrong. Bullet point 1, I missed that. Bullet point 1 is unchanged. Bullet point 2, I'll read. Approximately 3 acres of land located on Herrick Drive, shown on the town of Milton assessor's maps as Map E, Block 17, Lot 35, and Map E, Block 17, Lot 35. Bullet 3 is... Pardon me, Lot 34 and Lot 35. Point 3, unchanged. Checking. Point 4 is unchanged. Point 5, I'll read it. Approximately 41 acres of land located around and inclusive of Pope's Pond, shown on the town of Milton's assessor's maps as Map C, Block 34A, Lot 4, a portion of which not to exceed 4 acres shall be transferred to the care, custody, management, and control of the Parks and Rec Department to be used for the creation of a playground. And bullet 6, approximately 18.94 acres of land off of Randolph Avenue, shown on the town of Milton assessor's maps as Map 1, Block 38E, Lot 3, and Map 1, Block 38E, Lot 2, A to F included. Lastly, and to transfer to the care, custody, and management and control of the Parks and Recreation Department and to be subject to the provisions of Article 97. Bullet point 1, approximately 4.86 acres of land off of Randolph Avenue consisting of portions of land shown on the town of Milton assessor's maps as Map 1, Block 38D, Lot 6, and Map 1, Block 38D, Lot 7.
One question. Should the last number 1 actually be number 7 since it's the seventh point of bullet point?
You're referring to the numbering of the bullet points, ma'am?
Yes, that very bottom one, should that be 7 and not number 1 again? The very bottom one?
I believe it's formatted as meant to be a new bullet within a new paragraph, so to speak.
Sir?
So, since this was proposed by the Select Board and approved by the Warrant Committee tonight, that makes it the new main motion before the body, replacing what was printed in your warrant. Is that clear? Okay. It does not require a vote or an amendment in order to make it so. The recommendation of the Warrant Committee is thus amended, and that's our main motion before the body. With that, I'd first like to recognize the Select Board. I think by prior agreement, Mr. Zulis, we said if 31 passes, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Mike Zulis, Precinct 3 Town Meeting Member, Chair of the Select Board. I thought my brother, Chair Humphreys, was going to go first, but happy to do so. Ladies and gentlemen, my friends, Article 32 arose from Town Council's advice on how to best position the town to proceed legally with the land swap. Now, Town Council's obligation is to advise the town on legal matters. Town Council advised the Select Board that this eminent domain option would put the town in the best position in the event of a certain legal argument raised against the town. The Select Board, charged with representing the town and its residents, submitted this article to protect and advance the interests of the town. Now, this is a somewhat unique eminent domain article. It does not involve any private property. All of the property in the article is already owned by the town. This is the same property we were talking about in Article 31, the land swap article. The idea, just as with Article 31, is to take some of the property that's controlled by the Parks Department and the Conservation Commission and swap it for other land in order to build a school. and to put that other land into the Parks Department and the Conservation Commission. So what the town would be doing, and here's where it gets a little arcane, what the town would be doing is taking land already owned by the town for itself, for no cash, but for the consideration of the other land, so the town can use the land to build a school. Is that clear? No. So let me try a little more. What prompted this article was a letter last August from a lawyer who is paid to represent the interests of our friends at Home Inc. against the town. Now, that lawyer's obligation, and I understand he may be here tonight, is to zealously pursue the interests of Home Inc. And that letter raised this legal argument, and town council, whose obligation is to zealously pursue the interests of the town, suggested this eminent domain article as a way to put the town in the best legal position, if that legal argument were made. So it's a little bit of an interesting twist here, because we have the lawyer coming before town meeting to try to convince this town meeting not to put the town in the best position in response to his legal argument. If you'll permit me an analogy, this would be like Doc Rivers, the coach of the 76ers, going up to Coach Mazzulla of the Celtics tonight and saying, "Coach, I want you to only play 4 players tonight instead of 5. Coach Mazzulla wouldn't agree to that, and neither should you. Now, there have been a couple of rhetorical questions that have come up during our discussions of this. The first rhetorical question is, isn't this a bad precedent? Isn't this a slippery slope? The answer is no. This is a unique situation that we've never seen before, and that we won't see again. The reason we won't see it again is because we have no more land to swap. And the purpose here, again, is to protect the town's interests. The second rhetorical question that's been raised is, what does this say about the town? What it says about the town is that we protect the town, and we put the town in the best position to succeed. It says that we act in the best interests of the town. We all represent the best interests of the town and its residents. So when you listen to the arguments, think about the best interests of the town. Think about how to put the town in the best and strongest legal position. If you do that, then I believe you'll vote yes on Article 32. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you. I'd like to recognize the chair of the Warrant Committee just for a minute.
I'll be brief. I don't want to get stuck between the attorneys. It's like, what, is everybody a lawyer around here? Right? Right. Well, I'm more of a law-talking guy. Be that as it may. Briefly, the Warrant Committee is in support of this article. The changes that we made here that we're in support of was, number one, was taking the conditionality of our recommendation out of the warrant. What we had done at the Warrant Committee when we debated this article was that we had taken the time to anticipate what if the town was in favor of Article 31. We didn't want to have to break out for 4 hours to debate that when town meeting is completely capable of debating this for 4 hours on their own. And they didn't need us to do that for them. So what we wanted to do was that we had conditionally voted our approval of this, the thought process being that in a case such as this one, where the people had spoken, and that the town wanted to go forward with the land swap, is that we did want to support the select board and the school building committee with whatever resources they needed in order to complete the job. Which may include eminent domain. We do have significant concerns about the legality, et cetera. But the thing that differentiates our comment with regards to 32 versus between eminent domain and land swap, the decision whether or not to go forward with the eminent domain is up to the select board and the school building committee. Whereas in the other one, our concern was as those decisions would be made elsewhere. So therefore, we wanted to be able to authorize them to use that tool if that was what they felt was the best tool, and that's what we would ask you to consider in our recommendation for yes. Thank you.
Thank you. By prior agreement, the attorney for Home Inc. asked for permission to speak, which has been granted. So, sir, if you could introduce yourself and state the fact that you're representing your, yes, please, your client.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
By the way, sir, you'll have 10 minutes. Okay.
Oh, certainly. Thank you. Set my timer here. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Good evening, members of town meeting. My name is Luc Legere. I'm an attorney with the law firm of McGregor, Legere, and Stevens. I have already been referred to tonight. It was indeed my letter last August that set off the chain reaction that has led us to considering Article 32 here this evening. First, I would like to just make one thing very clear to all the members of town meeting. I'm not against the town of Milton. And my clients, Home Inc., are not against the town of Milton. I heard that stated earlier. That is not at all true. My clients at Home Inc. are for the town of Milton, honoring the obligations and commitments that it has made to its residents. And that is what's really led us here tonight. So I'd ask that you all just take a little trip back in time with me here, back to 1977, 1978. At that time, Amy and Rosamond Lamb were considering donating a large tract of land to the town of Milton. It's about 22 acres. That proposal came to town meeting in 1977. Town meeting voted to approve acquisition of that property. No action was taken. The following year, 1978, another warrant article was presented, basically the same proposal for those same 22 acres. One of the reasons that the warrant committee recommended reconsidering this, even though town meeting had already voted to approve it once, was because the article in 1977 didn't really make clear that the one condition upon which the Lamb sisters wanted to convey this property to the town. And that condition was that about 7 acres, 7.5 acres of the 22 be protected in perpetuity as open space in its natural state, as conservation land. And in 1978, the warrant article made that crystal clear. And town meeting again voted to approve. It was very clear in the language of that warrant article that the 7 acres was being acquired by the town as part of the larger 22, quote, to be maintained for conservation purposes, end quote. The warrant committee report in 1978 and the town report of that year confirm that that was the intent and that that condition was attached to the town meeting vote and to any acquisition of the property. The deed itself, which the town accepted, is crystal clear that the 7.5 acres conveyed to the conservation, be conveyed to the care, custody, and control of the Conservation Commission under Mass General Laws, Chapter 40, Section 8C. That is the statute that established conservation commissions here in the Commonwealth. Most of us today know conservation commissions as the local boards that implement the State Wetlands Protection Act and any local wetlands bylaws or ordinances. Conservation commissions predate wetlands laws here in the Commonwealth. They were established first and foremost for the purpose of accepting and controlling land for promotion of natural resources and the protection of watershed resources. The deed that the town accepted for this property tracks that language precisely. This 7 acres, shown on a plan attached to the deed, was to be accepted by the town and conveyed to the care, custody, and control of the Conservation Commission for precisely those purposes: promotion of natural resources, protection of watershed. That deed also prohibits any buildings, structures, filling, grading on those 7.5 acres. Could not be more clear. The town accepted that deed with that language. The town paid a discounted price for this property, significantly discounted from its market value. There were a couple of appraisals done at the time, and the town paid significantly less for this land than it was actually worth at fair market value. Not only did the town pay less than fair market value, the town applied for, received, and accepted. Mr. Moderator, may I
If
finish
you
my
could
comments, please?
pause just for a minute. Yes, sir.
Mr. Moderator, Tom Callahan, Precinct 4. This, to my ear, sounds like a debate of Article 31, not Article 32.
Thank you. I was listening for that, but since there is extensive language in here read in about taking land into and out of conservation, and the attorney is describing the taking it in and out of the history of that conservation, I'll allow it on that grounds, and also because I think we've allowed people to speak pretty freely, 75 on Article 31. And so, sir, I've paused, and if you'll please continue.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Picking up where I left off. The town applied for, received, accepted, and used state fund money to facilitate the purchase of this property through the so-called Massachusetts Self-Help Program Grant Fund. The application filed with the state at the time and the agreement entered into between the town and the state confirmed the purpose that I just mentioned a moment ago and confirmed there'd be no construction on the 7.5 acres of land. That application made very clear that this so-called land conservation buffer zone was just for conservation and passive recreation. That is it. The application filed by the town even suggested that the town should place a conservation restriction on the property and would do so as a, quote, added safeguard. The result of all this is that the town holds this property in a public trust for the benefit of the residents and citizens of the town of Milton. There are a line of cases that establish this. I've cited those in the August letter from last year that was already mentioned. And the response to that wasn't to say that I was wrong, and there's a reason for that. I'm not wrong. The public trust doctrine turns on the language of the deed and the intent of the grantors. And as we've already established, the language of the deed couldn't be clearer, the intent of the Lamb sisters couldn't be clearer. The town was aware of all of this, went into this deal with eyes wide open, accepted it all. If there's any doubt, last year, the Lamb sisters' heirs wrote a letter to the town saying, we don't agree with this. This wasn't the intent of the Lamb sisters when they conveyed it. They wanted this land to be held for conservation purposes in perpetuity.
Sir, you have about 3 minutes.
Thank you. That brings us to Article 32. The answer that has been presented to town meeting here is to use the town's extraordinary power of eminent domain for the unprecedented purpose of taking land from itself. That's right. You've heard it here already. It's unique. It's arcane, to use Mr. Zulis's own words. There's a reason that this doesn't happen. Because General Law, Chapter 40, Section 14, which grants the town the authority to use eminent domain power, explicitly says that the town can't use its eminent domain authority for land that is, quote, already appropriated to public use. That codifies, it's consistent with the public trust doctrine that I mentioned earlier. And here we have town-owned land that is already appropriated to a public use. The town cannot take that land from itself for another use. Article 32 should fail for that reason alone. It should also fail because, in my opinion and the opinion of my clients, this would be a bad faith exercise of the town's eminent domain authority. There are a line of cases talking about this. I've cited them in a letter to the town more recently. But essentially what we have here is a situation where the town is admittedly taking this land from itself to circumvent the public trust doctrine. And there's a line of cases that say a town or a city might give a reason for taking land by eminent domain, say to build a school. But if you look beyond that stated reason given and the actual purpose is something else, that's bad faith. And I don't think that's just me saying to you that there's an ulterior motive here. We've heard that. We heard it tonight. The purpose here is to put the town apparently in the best legal position to defend itself should it face a claim under the public trust doctrine.
You've got 1 minute, sir. Thank you.
I cannot agree that this article would not create a bad precedent. I think it would create a bad precedent. I also feel strongly that it sends a very bad message to the residents, and I heard Mr. Zulis's comments disagreeing with that, but I do believe that you as town meeting members need to ask yourselves, what message does it send to Milton residents who may in the future be interested in donating or selling at a discount land to the town for a particular purpose if they see that here in 2023, that purpose will be ignored as soon as it doesn't suit the town anymore.
And sir, if you could wrap up. Thank you.
That's all I have this evening. I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Do any other members wish to speak to this article? Please make your way down front. Yes, ma'am.
Kathleen O'Donnell, Precinct 7. I rise not to necessarily speak for or against this article, but just to provide some clarification. I have, in fact, exercised eminent domain on behalf of my municipal clients. Unlike many of the people in this room, I've actually recorded orders of taking. First of all, I'd like to address one minor point just raised by Council for Home Inc., which was donations to conservation land. I want to point out to you folks that the other day, we approved the Community Preservation Act and its exercise of funds. And I'd like you to know that anything that a town buys with CPA money must be protected by a perpetual restriction approved by the Commonwealth. So the risk that has happened in this particular situation, where there's a deed without any kind of term of it and no perpetual restriction, will not be something that will happen with our CPA purchases going ahead. Just wanted to reassure people on that point. But I'm actually, as I said, not speaking for or against eminent domain in the Article 32, but just wanted to point out that for almost 30 years, I've represented towns, cities, and the MBTA extending its Green Line with the acquisition of land, the taking of easements, and the transfer of custody, and the sale of land. And the warrant articles that I've drafted in the practice of my former firm was to always include language in our warrant articles for a purchase that would say that the town would acquire the property by gift, purchase, or eminent domain. And the reason for that is that on occasion, we would be acquiring property that would have title defects, problems, missing heirs, that sort of thing. For the longest time, I did all the open space acquisitions for the town of Dennis, and every single one of them was done by eminent domain. Because as you can imagine, large parcels of open space on the Cape are only available for open space purchases because the titles stink and you can't put a McMansion on them. So that was standard practice in those kinds of acquisitions. So as I said, I've used eminent domain on behalf of towns to clear title to town property, unlike the claim made by Council for Home Inc. It's not that unusual. If a town has acquired property through tax title foreclosures, low value takings, that sort of thing, the only way to really clear that title is to clear it by eminent domain. And just last summer, I recorded an order of taking for one of my clients to clear a problem that was created on property that the town was trying to sell for redevelopment. They'd owned it for 20 years. And the buyer's attorney did the title and found out that there was a mistake with subdivision plans. The planning board had approved 3 or 4 of them. They used the wrong ones in the deed. And the only way to fix that was to take it by eminent domain, provide notice to whatever heirs we could find, publish in the newspaper in case we couldn't figure out who we should send those notices to. So using eminent domain for those purposes is not, as I said, not unusual, not unprecedented, and it does not actually demonstrate bad faith. So what I would like to point out lastly is that what the article does is grant the select board the authority or the power to use eminent domain, but it does not mandate that they use eminent domain. It provides them with a tool for this project that we'd like to go forward with a new school. And as I said, if we were buying this property outright right now, eminent domain would be recommended highly to be in that article. So it's not a target, it's not targeting one particular issue, it's providing a tool, as we had somebody, a town meeting member, mention the other day, that this is a process. It's a step in the process. It provides the town with a tool in its toolbox, which it can choose to use or not. And it's always handy to have a tool that you might need later on. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. I think I saw Mr. McLean next. Sir, you're recognized.
Hi, I'm Lee Michael McLean, Precinct 10 Town Meeting Member. Before we hear from a lot more lawyers and get too carried away, I just wanted to clarify that we just had an attorney approach this body and ask us to vote contrary to a way that 2/3 of the body voted last night. And I can't imagine that that would be in our best interest to do. So I would defer to our own town legal counsel, because there is a group in the room and who has been here with us all week that is vested contrary to the way that we voted last night. And so now we're in a legal situation, and we should defer to our town council and the way they tell us to vote, because we need to protect the best interests of our town. And lastly, I hope the fact that there is an attorney here tonight trying to sway us to vote a certain way, who represents a client in the town who isn't happy with our vote last night, I hope that isn't a preview of war or a declaration of war or a threat to sue, because 2/3 of town meeting voted last night that we intend to move forward with putting a school next to Home Inc., and now we're going to move forward with it. That doesn't mean that anybody has to take the town to court. So I hope that doesn't happen. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Perry, you're recognized.
Oh, hi. I'm Joe Modugno, Precinct 4.
I'm sorry, Joe.
You know, I've heard a lot about this toolbox people have been talking about, and that this is one of the things we can do as a town and that kind of thing. I just hope ethics is in the toolbox as well. You know, we have to do the right thing. And I do think this is an ethical question. I feel extremely troubled by this. And given that the town has used eminent domain years ago to seize many acres of Lamb family land, while the Lamb sisters' mother was sick in a hospital on top of it all, raises the question, should we as a town add insult to injury and grab more Lamb family land this way? The fact that the school building committee and select board feel an urgent need to use this tactic only points out to me and others that what so many have said about the land swap proposal from the start, it's a risky proposition, one built on shaky legal and ethical grounds and prone to legal challenges. The town's reputation is at stake here. We should agree that this article crosses a red line, ventures into new territory that we should say no to. If Milton votes to take the Gall Road land by eminent domain, this action would be one that predictably and rightly will cause significant public pushback in the town and in the land conservation community at large. So the questions arise, like so many of the questions that came up in the debate around Article 31. Who are we as a community? What are we modeling for our children and teenagers? If we teach our kids the lesson that the ends justify the means, well, then the big people in the room tonight need to walk the talk and act appropriately. Is positioning always the right end that justifies the means? Is this what we teach our kids? If you're confident in the rightness of your yes vote from last night, then you won't feel the need to adopt an article that seeks to avoid consequences and is obviously an overreach on the part of the town. Passage of this article, to quote a Warrant Committee member, gives way to a precedent that taking conservation land by this method will never stop and that nothing is really protected in the end. Sadly, we may spend the 21st century trying to preserve that which we thought we had preserved in the past century. That's a quote by Mark Robinson. Draw the line in the sand. Let's pull ethics out of the toolbox tonight and do the right thing. Please vote no on this misguided article. Thank you.
Thank you. I recognize Mr. Tangi in the white. Thank you.
Thank you. Nick Tagney, Town Meeting Member at Precinct 3. I'm against using eminent domain for this project. I believe, as the last speaker said, that the project has as much merit as the proponents believe, that we really shouldn't use eminent domain. The use of eminent domain is the act of the powerful against the powerless. And that seems particularly offensive in 2023 when society is really focused on fairness. Additionally, history is littered with bad outcomes from the use of eminent domain. And here in Milton, we can really observe that. Just look at the Southeast Expressway going through East Milton Square, where Milton is still suffering from the devastating effects of that, and we still can't get the deck to come out the way everybody would be really happy. Lastly, if the town is willing to use eminent domain for the acquisition of land for the school, I think that really opens up a lot of additional sites in the town of Milton. Things like Walson Golf Course, the Fawn Pond site that was considered before, some of the farms on the upper end of Canton Ave. Just use eminent domain to go get those and get a better site for the school. We're prepared to spend $8 million for the Fawn Pond site. Use eminent domain on that site now or one of the other sites that I just listed and focus on the preservation of the conservation land that's been out there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Oldfield, you're recognized.
Hi, I'm Maggie Oldfield, Town Meeting Member from Precinct 5 and a Planning Board member. I have one question and then a couple comments. I'm wondering if Town Council's obligation is to zealously pursue the best position for the town, I'm wondering if Town Council will share in the expense of the litigation to come. I rise to say that I'm against Article 32 to take land out of conservation by eminent domain. It's a gross abuse of power. This process implies to me that we don't have the authority to acquire the land respectfully or legally. My understanding is no other town has done this taking of land out of conservation by eminent domain. This is a bad and reprehensible precedent that we are setting for the town. It's a drastic action on the part of a town that is land-starved. What piece of property gets taken out of conservation by eminent domain for the next project? Will this become our land policy? To take not just from itself, but from the residents of the town because it's easy and less costly. But is it really? And who will you go after next? While they may be separate articles, the land swap and eminent domain, they have a common theme, uncertainty. As I understand it, with the adoption of the new Public Lands Preservation Act regulations, which are currently being drafted, we do not know what is going to be implemented, and therefore it could be less stringent, or maybe it could even be more stringent. We are in a time of regulatory and legal uncertainty. What legal hurdles will eminent domain now bring to the table? I wonder what this will do to the timeline, which is already very long. How long will the litigation on the land swap and eminent domain last, and what will be the eventual cost that will be borne by the town and ultimately us, the taxpayers? Is it really worth it? And given that the environment is a hot topic for the administration of the state, and I thought this town, I'm wondering how kindly they'll look at this taking of conservation land by eminent domain. And more importantly, how are we going to view ourselves? There has been talk of legacy, but do we want eminent domain to be our legacy to our children? Take what you want when you want it. What are we teaching the next generation? I ask you no for a no vote on this article. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, just checking, was your reference to town council just a rhetorical question? You'd like a specific answer? I guess I'll go to perhaps Mr. Zulus of the Select Board of how the town will perhaps defend itself. You said had legal issues to come, ma'am, and use town council. Is that the essence of your question? Is that clear, Mr. Zulus?
No. So how the town will defend itself if there is some kind of legal claim brought?
Yes, I think that seems to be the nature of the member's question.
So I think town council, the town would defend itself. If there were a claim to arise, the town would defend itself as it always does. We would use town council, or if town council wasn't appropriate, we'd use another lawyer. But if I may, Your Honor, here I go again.
That's going to stick. It's going to stick.
I'm elevating you, Bob, Mr. Moderator. Mr. Moderator, town council could address, if you think it's appropriate, he could address, and may be appropriate for the body, address two of the points that was raised by the lawyer from Home Inc. That if this would be appropriate time to do that. Or we can wait until after if you like.
Perhaps since there was no specific question, in the interest of time, we'll wait to see if there's a specific question.
Fair enough.
I think next I had ma'am in front here. You recognized?
Hi, Elaine Benson, Precinct 7. I stand to move the question.
Okay. We had this the other night. Remember, our move the question is limit the debate to 5 minutes. This requires a second. There's been a second. Again, it's limit debate to 5 minutes, and no member may speak more than once. I think in the interest of time, I may just call for a voice vote. By the way, we've been below 5 minutes on every speaker so far, except for Mr. Legere, but up to you. So a quick voice vote. All in favor of, by the way, it takes a 2/3 vote, so I'll do this by ear. All in favor of moving the question, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. We will move the question. So speakers will be limited to 5 minutes, and no one may speak more than once. I think the next person I had was, let's see, sir, I think you.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Doug Hine, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 2. Full disclosure, like every other person in this room, I am an attorney. But I am not a land use attorney, so much as you would not go to a foot doctor if you had a heart problem, you would not come to me if you had a problem with property. However, I have a vague memory of taking the bar exam, and I have at least a rudimentary understanding of the law when it comes to this particular area. And I think a lot of folks don't understand what eminent domain is and how it may be used here and how a case against the town would look. And let me first say that I'm not scared by litigation against the town. We've been to court many times. We've done quite well for ourselves. Using litigation as a threat, it's somewhat flaccid in my opinion. But all that aside, what would happen is if we move forward with exactly what we approved by 2/3 majority yesterday, which is the land swap, someone were to file a lawsuit trying to stop that. In terms of using all the tools available to the town, eminent domain would be one of those tools. So the complaint would be filed to stop the town, and we would file some type of motion to dismiss that complaint. And essentially what we'd be saying at that point in time is we wouldn't get into the back and forth of what the Lamb sisters thought and what their relatives thought and trying to bring them back to life somehow. We would simply say none of that matters. The town is using eminent domain. It's our land, we're doing it. Now, I'm sure that's not anywhere near what a wonderfully crafted brief would look like, but I think that's kind of how it would work conceptually. The suggestion has been made that eminent domain is something used to squash the little guy, and you hear about that being done. Donald Trump was famous for doing that against small-time vendors to build hotels and things like that. This is not that. The legacy of this town is not going to be eminent domain. The legacy of this town is going to be a new school.
Thank you, Mr. Mullen.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Peter Mullen, Precinct 2. I rise in support of Article 32 and urge a yes vote. Mr. Laguerre said, I think at least twice, the language of the deed couldn't be clearer. Do you remember that? It certainly could have. He could have said, the deed could have said, in perpetuity, and there wouldn't be a question. It didn't. So there is ambiguity with regard to this, and there's nothing improper, illegal, unethical about doing a swap for this land. There's been suggestions that somehow it's unethical to use eminent domain. Eminent domain is a power, is an authority that municipalities are given by the state in order to deal with problems relating to land, title to land. It essentially authorizes public bodies to take private land or other land for public purposes. It's a good thing. It's how we get roads built. It's sometimes how we get schools built. As Kathleen O'Donnell pointed out, the fact that this body authorizes the Board of Selectmen to use eminent domain doesn't mean that eminent domain will in fact be used. It just means that they have that available should litigation arise and should it be advantageous to the town to use it at that point. There's concern been expressed about whether or not this is somehow going down a slippery slope and that all kinds of things will be taken by eminent domain. Eminent domain requires a public purpose for the taking. If the land is currently covered by conservation restrictions, then you have to go through Article 97 in order to take it. It doesn't take you outside of Article 97. There was a lot of concern expressed last night about the potential timelines for this project, and that litigation could lengthen the time between us having a school building that we can open and put students in and educate them. This is a tool that could help potentially lessen the time period for any litigation if litigation is filed. I'd urge a yes vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no additional speakers, we'll proceed to the vote. If everyone has their clickers ready, we could switch the screen over. Again, 2/3 vote. All those in favor of the motion before the body, please signify by pressing 1. Opposed, press 2. Abstain, press 3. By a vote of 165 yes and 72 no, I declare a 2/3 vote. Thank you. Now, our Chief Morale Officer, Ms. Gankarki, said people might like a stretch at this point. Does anyone feel like a quick 10-second get up and stretch? I won't give you that option. 10 seconds, please. Just a stretch. Ladies and gentlemen, if we could take our seats, we'll carry on. Thank you. Thank you, folks. If we could take our seats. If we could all take our seats. Thank you. I'd like to recognize Select Board Member Richard Wells, who has just a brief announcement. Mr. Wells, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Just a point of order tonight, a sad announcement to make. A longtime town resident, a former Park Department employee, a reporter, a sports reporter, for both the Milton Record Transcript and for many, many years. You all would know who he is Eddie Baker, who wrote the sports column for many years in the Milton Times. A legendary family in Milton is our senior town meeting member, Mrs. Croner would remember. If you grew up in this town years ago, way before my time, Baker Hot Top was the biggest paving company in the city of Boston. Ed Baker did pass today after a wonderful life, and I just ask you all if you'd give him a moment of silence. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Wells. And thank you to a life well lived, Mr. Baker, and his contributions to our town. With that, we'll proceed to Article 30 on schools. Recommended that the town appropriate the amount shown in the following tabulation under the heading Recommendation FY24. Schools, total schools, $61,574,062, and that to meet said appropriation, the sum of $61,073,362 be raised from the tax levy, and $500,700 be appropriated from funds certified by the Department of Revenue as free cash. This was submitted by the school committee. I'd like to recognize Chair of the school committee, Ms. Carroll.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Good evening, everybody. Lizzie Carroll,
Town Meeting Member Precinct 3 and Chair of the School Committee. So I'm pleased to present this FY24 budget for your consideration on behalf of the school committee. As the warrant committee points out in their comment, which I believe Chair Humphreys referenced the other night, what we are requesting is, in the warrant committee's words, appropriate to deliver services that are needed, in some cases desperately. We developed this consensus budget through collaboration with the town administrator and select board, and we thank them for their partnership. This proposed budget is grounded in the district's 5-year strategic plan, which the school committee approved last spring of 2022. Our strategic plan is driven by an overarching goal, which is here on the slide. But to boil this down, our goal essentially is excellence for every child. I'll speak more to how we do that on the next slide. This current strategic plan is far more streamlined and targeted than the previous strategic plan. It is regularly reviewed by the Strategic Planning Advisory Committee, comprised of Milton Public Schools staff, school committee members, and members of the community. It is a living document that is updated as needed. Our strategic plan is built on 3 interconnected pillars. Personalized learning is about making sure that every student is both challenged and supported according to their academic needs, as measured by various forms of data to achieve academic excellence. Safe and supportive schools is about making sure that every student feels the sense of belonging that is a necessary prerequisite to thrive academically, emotionally, and socially. Equity in learning is about making sure that all students receive what they need to be successful. Over the course of this year, we held community forums on each of these pillars to share information, answer questions, and engage in dialogue about these identified priorities. Our job as school committee and district leadership is to create conditions where staff are equipped to deliver on all 3 of these priorities. We as a school committee are committed to doing this in the context of our overcrowded schools, which we've been hearing a lot about. School committee will be focusing on that this coming year, identifying additional short-term solutions, since we have seen that the solutions implemented up to this point are no longer adequate or sustainable. And of course, in the meantime, the school building committee will continue working toward that long-term solution. Over last summer, in the final phase of developing our strategic plan, the district identified benchmarks so we are able to track our progress toward achieving the goals laid out in the plan. On this slide, you can see the results that we expect in following this strategic plan. These results are aligned with our overarching strategic goal and the metrics that we are tracking. So I'll now hand it over to Dr. McKinney, who will share what has been accomplished this year, and then Dr. Pavlicek will walk us through the actual FY24 budget request. Thank you.
Dr. McKinney, you're recognized.
Thank you, Garth McKinney, Interim Superintendent and Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and HR. Here are some examples of some of the things the school department has accomplished this year. We've implemented a new elementary social studies curriculum, and we've made improvements to our K-12 math curriculum. We continue analyzing data at the district, school, grade, and classroom levels to find the learning gaps for kids and address them in a timely manner. Our grade levels and departments are planning instruction together and collaborating in new ways. And we're transitioning to a new digital platform, a suite of tools that allow us to collect student information, analyze it on a regular basis, and again, address the learning gaps that are presented in our students. We continue to check on their social emotional well-being coming out of the pandemic. We have a variety of measures and data points that we use on a regular basis. Our school improvement plans are aligned to the strategic plan and address some of these social emotional learning goals. And we continue to receive grant support thanks to the SEL Advisory Committee, and we use those funds to train up teacher leaders who support our schools and do vital training around social emotional learning and responding to trauma. Last but not least, we continue to address equity in learning. We've done a root cause analysis on disproportionality in special education, and we have a plan to address those issues. We received a $10,000 grant to help diversification of our staff, and we've also been a part of another grant for $15,000 to grow our own teachers, today's students, tomorrow's teachers. This slide speaks to the budgetary alignment between our requests and what's proposed tonight. Under personalized learning, we're asking for increased staff to address learning loss, such as a math interventionist and an additional grade 6 ELA teacher. We're asking for support for ARPA-funded supports, such as preschool coordinator, math support, part-time nurses, kindergarten aides, and BCBAs, which are vital in addressing student behavior. And lastly, we ask for continued increased special education support to address the disproportionality issues that have been uncovered. Thank you, and at this time, I'll turn it over to Glenn Pavlicek. Thank you.
Mr. Pavlicek, you're recognized.
Thank you, Dr. McKinney. Glenn Pavlicek, Precinct 10, once again, Assistant Superintendent for Business Affairs. This year's budget is a little more complex because of the ARPA funding in it. So the easiest way to look at it is sort of to coalesce some of those funds together. We have some ARPA funding for this year, which decreases next year, but we also have some new ARPA funding for fiscal 24 that the Select Board has appropriated towards use of the schools. So when you put that together with the general fund appropriation, basically the cost of maintaining service, which is to say doing exactly what it is we do now with the same staff and the same methodologies, is about just about $2 million, or roughly a 3% increase. So it's roughly a 3% increase just to do what we're doing now. And in this current environment, that's not a bad thing. We've had larger increases in the past. The one piece about this is a little different, of course. If you only look at the general fund part of it, because there's a reduction in ARPA funds, it's slightly more because we're losing about a little over $300,000 in ARPA funds this year. So it actually represents a 4% increase to the general fund. Those ARPA positions we're talking about these are the positions that were rolling off of ARPA funding this year. And so what's happened is we've taken some of them and put them on this new ARPA money to maintain them for a while, as was mentioned before, the preschool coordinator, the 504 team chair. This is for people who are on being serviced by the Americans with Disabilities Act, a high school math support teacher, our kindergarten aides, returning them to full-time. They were reduced to only 6 hours a day several years ago for budgetary reasons, and during the pandemic we brought them back to full-time because the kindergartens need that full-time aid. 2 part-time nurses and 2 board-certified behavioral analysts. These are positions we would have lost if the ARPA funding had gone away. The positions on the right side of the screen, the elementary reading specialist, 2 preschool teachers, those are special ed preschool teachers, and 3 special education aides, are positions we are transferred to the general fund. The preschool teachers, special education aides, these were discussed last spring for those of you who are here, as being funded by ARPA, but needing to be permanent positions because these were dealing with preschool classes and increasing enrollment. So we have transitioned them to the general fund. And the goal is obviously to transition the ones of these positions that we need into the general fund. It was asked to show this again. Last year we showed we were 297th out of 397 per pupil spending. As of a couple weeks ago, 311 districts have been certified so far. Milton ranks 241st out of 311. This is not to say, I'm not saying this to say give us more money. What I'm saying is we've managed very well on a tight budget And we're trying to spend our money as efficiently and economically as possible. So I think this is a measure of how well this district has done with the limited funding that we know is available due to constraints of town budget. So it is, in some sense, it's a good news story that we are where we are given where we are. Again, by category, if you look at the special education instruction and regular education instruction here, that's 73% of our budget. Instructional services, 9% are things like guidance and adjustment counselors, nurses, buses, so forth. Those are all student services. So that puts us well over 80%. Policy and administration central office at 3%. Instructional leadership are your principals and coordinators. So we are a instruction-heavy organization. Over 80% of our budget goes to that. In terms of what we need beyond just maintaining level service, this year there were a variety of needs, and as we said in this budget that we've worked out with the cooperation of the select board and the school committee and town administrator and others, we've identified some needs that were able to be funded in this budget. And along the lines of the three pillars that were mentioned earlier, for the academic needs, we want to include an additional elementary math interventionist. We have 2. This will allow us to address more students in terms of learning loss at the elementary school, and a grade 6 ELA support teacher, again, dealing with English language arts issues as students transition into the middle school. Current ELA teachers, as it says, currently are dealing with over 125 students each. That's a lot. In special education, 2 years ago we had 778 children who were identified on individual education plans. Last year it went to 860. As of the end of March, it's at 895. So we have added over 100 students onto special education roles in the last 2 years. Currently, close to now 20% of our students have an IEP. And as a result, some of the needs we have to deal with special education. We need to add, all of these are required by the increased enrollment in current IEPs, we need to add an additional speech therapist, half-time occupational therapist, half-time physical therapist. These are controlled by the number of contact hours we have to have for all the students who are on IEPs. If we don't hire these, we have to contract them out, and contracting them out is more expensive. We also need a couple extra classes. We have an increased enrollment in our lower grades. The additional class on the students on the autism spectrum is actually going to be at the Cunningham now. It's hard to tell sometimes what point of the building it's in. But that's due to increased enrollment, and our students on that program, those classes are full. They have caps mandated by law. We don't have any room in there. We have more students coming up. We have 3 more students that we're adding immediately. So we need a special education teacher and 2 aides to deal with that classroom. So that we have to do, and an additional teacher at the high school, as our first wave of students on the autism spectrum from several years ago are now entering the high school. We need to have more support there for those students. Again, we could not do these if we didn't fund them, but we would be having outplacements here. This would be at least 5 students outplaced, cost at least $750,000. So funding these is cost avoidance. And at one other special education need, we're looking at adding 3 special education teachers at the Tucker School. We currently have 3 teachers who really service the students at that school. It doesn't have any specialized programs, unlike the other schools, because of its size. But we have 3 special education teachers to work the 6 grades. By adding 3 more, we can put 1 in each grade, creating essentially a version of a co-talk class in each grade, servicing students, keeping them in their home school. Right now, if a student develops a more complicated IEP at Tucker, we might have to move them to another school where they can be serviced appropriately. Now we can stand a better chance of keeping them in their home school.
Dr. Pavlicek, 2 minutes.
We had an equity audit a couple years ago, and the state found us, we've heard the word disproportionality twice. I think it's probably the longest word you'll hear tonight and probably the least informative. What it means is basically that the state found that students of color were more likely to be placed on ed plans than corresponding students who were not of color. And similarly, there was a higher rate of disciplinary action of students of color. And the state refers to that, if it happens more than 3 years, as disproportionality. And we are mandated to address it. In fact, we are mandated to spend on the order of $200,000 this year to address it, because it comes out of some of our grant money. So what we are looking at is to hire what's called an equity coach to work with the teachers to address the issues that seem to be underlying this. Why is it that some of these students are being placed more frequently on ed plans than they should be, or they would be expected to be, let me say? Why is it that the rates of discipline are higher? And this is to work with teachers and administrators to try to discover the underlying effects of this and see why it's happening.
About a minute more, sir.
And finally, thank you, one technology staff member. We have, as I say, as it says, we have a director of technology and 3 staff for 5 buildings, 5,000 machines. It doesn't work. It's fewer people we had years ago. So that's our recommendation. It's broken out here how it ties to the warrant. These are the positions that would be funded through the free cash, the rest through the general fund appropriation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Does anyone wish to speak to this article? If you did, would you make your way down front? And I just see Mr. Fahey. Mr. Fahey, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Sean Fahey, Precinct 9, town meeting member. A couple of questions. And I think, Mr. Moderator, I'm hoping I'll get an answer while I stand if I could, so I may have a follow-up question. One question, the Warrant Committee, in the 3rd paragraph of their comment, writes, and this is obviously, as they write in this is relative to the American Rescue Plan Act and the funds that we have received and how we've been able to use them. But there's a caution here from the Warrant Committee, and it reads, the Warrant Committee has recommended that the school department review and determine areas where costs could be reduced without compromising the quality of education provided in the Milton Public Schools. As a taxpayer, I appreciate that, but that seems to run contrary to the needs. And I'm just wondering, what happens? How does the school department, do they follow that recommendation? And if they do, how do they do that? I have a second question too, Mr. Moderator, and I can put it forth now.
I just want to make sure I understand the first one. How does the school department
respond to the Warrant Committee recommendation?
Okay, respond to it. Okay, thank you. And yes, your second question?
My second question is relative to what was part of the presentation, that of our school budget, 80% of the school budget is dedicated and devoted to instruction. And we've seen comparisons of other towns and what other towns invest per student. I wonder, what data do we have so we could compare other towns or our 80% commitment to instruction to other towns? And by simple math, I guess I'm looking at a budget that's 61 million. And if 80% is dedicated to instruction, that would mean 20% is dedicated not to instruction, but to leadership and administration. So my math would say that we're dedicating 12 million to leadership and administration. So I think I've given you a little bit there, Mr. Moderator, but if I could, those are my questions.
Okay, so the second question is, how does Milton's 80% of its budget on instruction compare to other towns and the percent they spend on instruction?
Correct. And if my math is correct, are we really spending 12 million on leadership and administration?
Understood. Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Pavlicek, you recognized?
As far as comparisons go, on the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education website, you can look up every school system, and in fact, every district in the state under these exact categories. These are the DESI categories that we report to. So you can look up any of this data for any school system going back quite a while in terms of finding out how we measure against other communities. There is a certain caveat there. Even though they try to make everything apples to apples, that doesn't always work. For instance, if we have a high school department head who is in charge of a particular department and is a part-time administrator and teaches 2 courses, we would say that person is 60% in administration and 40% a teacher. Another district might say, well, they teach, so they're a teacher. There's not hard and fast rules on the accounting there, so there is a little bit of fuzziness in how you compare one district to another just because of the way individual districts choose to report. But it's a reasonable computation. The 80% I mentioned really is teachers and support services. That doesn't follow that the rest is administration. For instance, a good portion of that are our utility costs and our facilities costs. 8% of it is that. Our administration, as the slide shows, is actually about 2%. And the other 7% or so that says administrative leadership are principals and assistant principals and those portions of department heads that are actually evaluators because we put them there. If we had called them teachers, our numbers would look higher for instruction. But no, we don't spend $12 billion on administration. In fact, we run much leaner than most systems on administration. Going back to the first question, how do we deal with the fact that using ARPA funds is a finite process, that they will be going away? We have to look at the school finance subcommittee looks at this. They meet with the select board finance subcommittee in terms of town finances. We have to look at it and meet with the principals and say what needs to continue. When do you say that you need fewer support in this area or that? Some of it is not going to go away. The special ed needs are going to be the special ed needs. And in a sense, those costs legally mandated are not easily contained. If we add, going back to other things, more space, I'd love to take, if we had open classrooms, I'd love to take some of the students who are currently in out-of-district placements and bring them back so we could house them here and service them here, but we can't do that. We don't have the room to do that. But those are some of the things that you look at in terms of cost containment. As far as, on the, for instance, utility side, we bid utilities with the town. We just put in a new bid for electric utilities. We do bulk buying with the town. Bill Ritchie is the one who has done this for many years, and now Chris Hayden's taken over, so we're looking at these things. And all of our products are bid through state contracts to try to get the best possible price. So we do watch things, and we have to look at, every year you look at your enrollment, you look at your students, you look at the needs, and you adjust. What might happen as enrollments change at various schools, needs change, the number of teachers in a particular grade may change, and you just have to modify it and move with your clientele. Thank you.
Mr. Fahey, do you have a follow-up?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Thank you, Mr. Pavlicek. I appreciate the clarity. So, and I should say, I do deeply appreciate what we do in the Milton Public Schools. I have 2 graduates, and I'm very proud of what they did while they were in the Milton Public School system, so thank you. 7%, I appreciate that clarity. So 7% is the percentage that we dedicate to leadership and administration. Okay, so 7% of 61 million would be approximately 4.2 million?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you,
Mr. Fahey.
I would say that also includes legal services and things like that. It's not all people.
Admin and legal services. Okay, thank you. Yes, name you recognized.
My name is Miriam Lundgren, Precinct 1 town meeting member. I just wanted to share that my son has been outplaced because he is dyslexic, and he has been sent to a different school because we did not have programming in place throughout all of what he needed to stay here. So we started in Tucker. We were trying to find special ed people to service him, and then like fought for those services, but it was very difficult to keep consistent special ed through all of our grades. So I just wanted to say that if we had programming, and just so you know, like outplacing students to these other schools, it sounds very simple, like they get everything they need, but it's $72,000 a year to place my child in a different program. So that's the cost of hiring a special ed teacher. And so I'm just saying, like, if we can keep our students here, and that also, like, just so you know, I have to drive to Beverly every afternoon. I'm in the car for 3 hours every afternoon to go get my child. So I just want you to know, like, if we can keep our kids in our schools, if we can provide the education that they need here, it is well worth the effort. You will save this town money because they will not be outplacing kids to other schools that are in all across this state. And so I just wanted to say, please consider that when you're considering this budget.
Thank you, ma'am. Seeing no other speakers, we'll proceed to the vote. If you have clickers ready, if we could switch over to the software. This is a majority vote. All those in favor of Article 30, the school budget, please signify by pressing 1. Opposed, press 2. Abstain, press 3. The article carries. By a vote of 218 to 4. We'll proceed to Article 33. 33, recommended that the town vote to authorize the school building committee to employ an owner's project manager, architects, engineers, or other professionals for the purposes of conducting feasibility studies and/or preparing detailed plans, specifications, working drawings, and other necessary documents for the construction and furnishing of a school building, and approximately $275,000 from funds certified by the Department of Revenue as free cash for the purposes of this article. I'd like to start by prior agreement with recognizing Mr. Zulis. Mr. Would you like to speak first, or go right to Mr. O'Rourke? Mr. O'Rourke, you recognize, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Sean O'Rourke, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 8, Chair of the School Building Committee. No slides tonight. We're going to keep it very brief. You know, the article before you now is essentially to provide funding to the School Building Committee to allow us, as we've been asking, to progress. You know, with this funding, we'll be utilizing architects and engineers to further our design. You know, some of the concerns that have been brought up, specifically traffic, stormwater, we'll be engaging engineers for that. One of the other ones we'll be touching on are essentially landscape architects. You know, as we've heard multiple times, Home Inc. is our abutter. We do have a 50-foot zoning buffer there. Our intent for that is to green that and make it as opaque as possible for them. So again, being as brief as I possibly can, I ask you to vote yes.
Thank you. I'll recognize Ms. Panarese.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Thank you, fellow town meeting members. My name is Alexandra Panarese, known as Sasa to the people that do know me here. I'm a town meeting member from Precinct 5. I would like to offer this friendly amendment to Article 33. I move to amend the article by inserting the following after furnishing of a school building, provided that no changes to the physical land proposed for the school can take place without a permit issued by the Conservation or the Parks Commission, respectively. And the reason for this friendly is that we will need to wait for the land swap to move through the system, Massachusetts system, and have our override to fund the new school, and this will take time. And there's no reason that the land should be disturbed until the school is shovel-ready other than for soil borings and other small disturbances which can be done with minimal destruction to the land. The Conservation and Parks Commission can oversee the permitting for this. We don't want to take down old growth trees and disturb a valuable ecosystem until the last possible minute. A clear-cut lot standing next to a school is not a good message to send to the next generation, and I think this is a friendly amendment that I hope makes sense.
Thank you, ma'am. With that, Karen, could you have the language on this? I think I forwarded it to you under Article 33, so the members can see the language. Nope.
I can read it.
Just want to make sure we can get the language. Can you perhaps give your language while I'm looking
Yes.
to see if we have it here? Perhaps hand it, if you could hand it right to the Karen sitting right at the front desk. Karen, I've just resent it to you, unless you have it right there. So if the school building committee could consider this, and then I'll go to the warrant committee for their opinion on this. By the way, Ms. Panarese did submit this in advance to me, and we crafted some language that I thought would be within scope. So I think this is an amendment within scope. So where this would get inserted, so the members know, is if you look in your warrant in the bold text, fourth sentence, toward the end it says furnishing of a school building. After the word building, this language would be inserted.
Bella.
Yeah, because I can't get more. I mean, that's good. That's reasonable, right? Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think we have some updates. So Ms. Panarese, have you had time to reconsider your language?
Yeah, I think that's reasonable.
So you'd like to modify your friendly amendment to the language we see in blue?
Yes.
Very good. Then I'll go to the school building committee for your opinion since you were submitting it. Yes, sir, Mr. O'Rourke, if you're nodding in the affirmative, you approve. Chair of the Warrant Committee, could you, the Chair of the Warrant Committee approves. So the recommendation has been amended as you see presented here. Ms. Panarese, anything else, or are we all good?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Next I had Ms. Swenson, I think, and then Ms. Agostino. Ms. Swenson, no. Ms. Agostino, you're recognized.
Diane DiTullio, Agostino, Precinct 9. Mr. Moderator, I have a few questions prior to deciding. I do appreciate the friendly amendment being proposed and accepted by everyone, but some of the outstanding questions that I'd appreciate an answer to is, without the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs approval of the land swap application, wouldn't the Lamb Woods basically be considered to remain conservation land, and as such could not be altered? That's one question. The next question that I forgot to start with was, who actually does apply for the EOEE application? Is it the Board of Selectmen? That's...
Thank you. Thank you. Please continue, ma'am.
Thank you for taking the questions. And what was the estimated number of years on the school building committee timeline that would get us past all the approval process? I recall there was some time frame, whether it was 2 years or what. So there was a timeline presented at one of the town meetings.
You mean the state approval processes?
Yeah, to get through, because it may not just be the state, it might be federal because of some slight federal funding.
The official approvals, not...
Yeah, all of them. Just throw them all in together.
Okay, very good. So with that, let's see, I'll go. Mr. Zulus, can you answer those questions for us?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Mike Zulus, Precinct 3 Town Meeting Member, Chair of the Select Board. Mr. Moderator, I can take number 3, and then Town Council can take numbers 1 and 2. Number 3, the estimate on the number of years, what we're estimating for the approvals is 9 to 12 months. That is aggressive. The reason we are aggressive in that estimate is because we've been working with EEI, and Town Council has been working with EEA for 2 years. So that is our estimate for getting both the state and the federal approvals, because the state approval, as we understand it, EEA will be a conduit to the federal approval. They will make the connection for us to the federal approval as well. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you,
and
Town Council.
Town Council can take numbers 1 and 2.
Good evening, Kevin Freitag from the Office of Town Council. To the first question, the answer is yes, the land continues to be protected by Article 97 unless and until the legislature approves the removal of the land by a 2/3 vote. So all the protections of Article 97 apply to both the active recreation and the conservation portions of this 22-acre parcel. Regarding the application to EEA, there isn't actually an application to EOEA. The town meeting will submit a request for special legislation to the legislature, just like we do in any other case of special legislation. Once there, it's typically referred to Senate Council, and then Senate Council consults with the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. And then the Executive Office of Environmental and Energy Affairs, hopefully at that point, as will be the case here, has spoken with the municipality at length about what the proposed special legislation is seeking. And so that's why we've been speaking with EOEA all along, to basically keep them in the loop and hopefully get their approval before it ever goes to the legislature, so that by the time it does get there and then eventually makes its way over to EOEA for an opinion, they've already seen the proposal, they've already given us all of their input on it, and hopefully we have their approval before it ever gets there.
Mr. Freitag, is there any federal approval required?
My understanding is that there will be, there were federal funds that were applied for and received to reimburse the town for a portion of the purchase of the conservation land in this instance. The town administrator recently had some follow-up with EOEA about the fact that we were concerned initially that some of those funds might require, the use of some of those funds might have required the purchase of new land. That's the result of some federal grants now require, if you use those funds to purchase conservation land, and then you subsequently take the land out of conservation, that you then have to purchase brand new land. You can't use municipal land as a swap. That's not the case for the funds that were in this instance. We've confirmed that through the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs.
So no to the member's question on federal.
No, that obligation does not exist, but we're continuing to work with EEA every step of the way here to see what, if any, other obligations we may have with regards to the federal funds and any work that will need to be done or actions that will need to be taken by the town regarding the use of some of the land that was purchased with the federal funds. Whatever is required by the federal authorities on that point, we're working with EEA to make sure we comply with.
Second follow-up, which town official actually sends the application for special legislation up to the legislature?
It has been the case in recent years that after the town meeting passes a request for special legislation, my office drafts the actual petition, and then I often then will just send it along to our legislative delegates so that they can then submit it to the general court for approval.
Thank you. You send it to our delegates and they submit. All right, very good. That answer the members' questions?
Diane DiTullio Agostino, Precinct 9. Mr. Moderator, I'm attempting to put together a very brief friendly amendment, and I don't, from what I read, and there's only a draft. Remember, we mentioned it was only passed February 12th of this year, the change, or we learned, under the Executive Office of Engineering and Environmental Affairs. So they only have a draft online. That was very difficult to even find, that I noted that it could get into, they gave you links into where you had to go to get approvals. And I recall the warrant committee, remember they said the application, I believe before, part of the application process is the legislation has to have approved it as well. And that it would be on, from what I saw from the application. So my friendly amendment, maybe this will help you get the correct answers, would be that until the town receives approval by the state and federal regulatory agencies, no changes. Oh, they did change that to construction or material destruction. Oh, you guys changed it.
Yes. Is that a never
No
mind
construction or material destruction of the land would begin. So it's just getting us past that point since we don't know the amount. I'm not making an amendment, but it's your Mr. Moderator. You can control the town meeting.
Thank you, ma'am. Do you have some specific language you'd like?
Until I get the answers, I can't do the language.
I'm confused. What exact question do you have then?
The application, you did just double check, and the warrant committee had mentioned there was an application, and reading everything under the EOEE, it discussed part of the application was having approval already from the legislation. But I just heard that backwards.
Yes. What I just heard from town council is town council will draft an application for special legislation and send it to the legislature. And then I also understand the legislature consults with this agency, and they come to some opinion, and then the legislature votes on the application for special legislation.
There is an application that has all sorts of other questions on it that has to go to the EOEE, and maybe the head of the warrant committee is familiar with the old application process.
Are you asking if there's two applications?
Right, that's basically what there would be.
Okay, let me find out from town council if there are one or two applications. Best we can get that clarified.
Kevin Freitag from the Office of Town Council. The Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs does have an online application process. The town is in the process of working with EEA to complete that. That's separate and apart from the application to the state for special legislation.
Okay, does that answer your question, ma'am?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. That, in fact, the application isn't online yet. They're still drafting it to get it completed. So that gave me the exact information I needed in order to ask if we can have a friendly amendment that until such time as the town of Milton receives approval from the Executive Office of Energy and Engineering Affairs, no construction or material destruction of the land will begin. And I'll write that down for you. Now that we got the answers, which
If you would,
I appreciate.
write that down.
I'm doing great. This is
John, we got an answer? You're rejecting the friendly? Okay. Dave, board committee opinion, reject? Are you going to accept the friendly?
Oh, do I have to?
Yes, it's your amendment, your recommendation, I need an opinion.
gotta get going. Come on.
They're just typing it up.
Pathetic.
Mr. Moderator, point of order, please. It's very late tonight. We've been at this for a while. I'm just confused as to what exactly is happening here. If there's a friendly amendment that's going on, or if Mrs. Augustino is offering an amendment, I think we have rules about having amendments or proposed amendments written down so we don't have this kind of delay. It looks like there's a substantial portions of the thing that may be trying to be rewritten. That kind of issue done on the fly doesn't usually work well, so I'd appreciate some clarification, and I would hope we could, if there is a proposed amendment, vote on it, and if not, just get to the article. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Coachella. Do we have the text typed up now? So, Ms. Agostino, you have the text written up here. Are you offering this as a friendly amendment?
No, to save time, we don't need the friendly amendment.
Then let's just pause. Is there a second?
Well, there's no amendment on the floor. There's no motion.
You just made a motion to, you said this is not a friendly, are you making a motion to amend?
Right, but I haven't read it.
Are you, ma'am, the language is right here. I'll read it. So, inserting after article, until such time as the town of Milton receives approval from the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs, funding appropriated at the 2023 annual town meeting will not include construction or material destruction of the land. Is there a second? There's a second. Then I'll go, then I think in the interest of time, ma'am, I think anyone wish to speak to this motion to amend? Ms. Panarese?
Yes, I don't like this motion. I think that it weakens my friendly. I think what happens, the idea of my friendly was just that we weren't going to be disturbing the land until we really had to. And I think, in a way, if we get these approvals, that will be sort of way before they would really have to start disturbing the land. And so I think that your amendment would allow disturbance sooner than my amendment. And so I would like to go with my original amendment.
Your amendment still stands, ma'am. Your language is still there.
Yes.
So, at the moment. Okay, so we have a motion made and seconded. Would you just explain in 30 seconds the purpose of this?
Okay, so having made the motion, the person making the motion generally explains it, so I appreciate the time. Unfortunately, as we saw, there were multiple answers back and forth. I thank the Select Board, School Building Committee, Warrant Committee for getting those answers that we needed. And part of the reason is the law just changed February 12th of this year. So what this would do, we would appropriate the money tonight. So we're not saying don't appropriate the money. We would appropriate the money tonight. We did learn from Town Council the land is currently under Article 97, so it can't be disturbed. However, once the Executive Office of Elder, that OEE instead of EOE, approves the two applications, well, one application, but the legislation approval goes on the application that's not even available yet online. And then, once they have approval, the Town of Milton Select Board and the School Building Committee could begin construction or material destruction of the land. So we're not saying don't spend the money, because they, like the school building chair just pointed out, they got to do drilling and things like that. But we don't want to have material destruction of the land. So the amendment basically gives them the money, and we just make sure that and this happened previously, the Henry's building. How many years do we get tied up? And that's why I feel we all can move forward.
Sir, you're recognized. Did you have you said you wanted to get up and speak on this. Do you wish to speak to this motion to amend?
Yeah, hi, Joe Chamberlain, Precinct 4. I actually had a question on the first amendment, friendly amendment. So the crossed out part right there. But my question really goes to the definition of what is material destruction. So I guess that's to the select board. Like, I'm worried about, like, if you put stakes in the ground with, with yellow or fluorescent ribbons around them, is that material? I mean, so what is material destruction? Thank you.
Mr. Zulus.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The idea that we discussed with Ms. Panarese is there may need to be boring in the land, but nobody wants to, or no one will, take down any trees or do anything major or material. It's just if you have to do land borings, that is a physical act in the land. It's not material, it's small, it's not major. And so that's the idea of the language, just to make sure that the school building committee won't be restrained in what it needs to do, but at the same time there'll be no disturbance of the land in any material way. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
I'm seeing no other members wishing to speak to this. I'm just going to go to a quick voice vote. So what you're voting on here, do you accept the new blue language? Or if you reject it, we'll go back to the prior blue language that was accepted as a friendly, and then we'll vote on the article. So do you accept the new blue language or not? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Pardon me, you're right. Warrant Committee, your opinion? So, Select Board, your opinion on this?
Well, it's actually, the school building committee does not accept the new amendment.
Thank you. Mr. Humphries?
Mr. Moderator, the Warrant Committee votes no with regards to the amendment.
Thank you. So, again, we'll go to a quick voice vote. All those in favor of accepting the new blue language, amending this recommendation, please signify by saying aye. Opposed, no? No. The motion fails. Anyone else wish to speak to Article 33? Seeing none, we'll go to the full vote on Article 33 as amended with Ms. Panarese's blue language. If everyone clear on that? Very good. If we could get out your clickers or put up the poll. Can you start the poll, Rob? Thank you. The article carries with a positive vote of 199 to 11 no. With that, we'll go to article number 34 was passed by consent, 35 was passed by consent, 36 was passed by consent. We'll go to article 37. Recommended that the town vote to rescind the authorized but unused portions of the amounts authorized to be borrowed to pay costs of capital projects shown in the following tabulation. I won't read all the details of it. This was submitted by the Select Board. Does anyone wish to speak to this article? Seeing none, this just requires a majority vote. Yes, Ms. No. Just requires a majority vote. If we could put up the poll. Are we fixing a clicker? Okay. You ready, Mr. Mallett? If you could open up the poll. All those in favor of Article 37, please signify by pressing 1. Opposed, no. Press 2. Abstain, please press 3. The motion carries with a vote of 205 yes to 2 no. We'll now proceed ahead. 38 was passed by consent, as was 39 and 40. We'll proceed to Article 41. Recommended that the town vote pursuant to Chapter 44, Section 53E and a half of the Massachusetts General Laws to establish a revolving fund in order to utilize trench excavation application fees, inspection fees, and paving fees paid to the Milton Department of Public Works for the purposes of administrative services related to issuing permits for work conducted in the public way, performing permanent pavement restoration to excavations made in the public way by permittees, and for inspecting that work to ensure compliance with town standards, to authorize the Director of Public Works to expend money from such revolving fund, to limit to $250,000 the total amount of which may be expended annually from such a revolving fund beginning in the fiscal year July 1, 2023. Does anyone need explanation or wish to speak to this article? It just requires a majority vote. If we could put up the poll. The motion carries with a positive vote of 205 to 2. Article 42 was passed by consent. Article 43, recommended that the town vote to accept the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 53F and a half of the Mass General Laws establishing the PEG Access Fund as an enterprise fund effective fiscal year 2024, and to vote to transfer to said enterprise fund the balance as of June 30, 2023 in the PEG Access and Cable Related Fund, and further to vote to revoke its acceptances of Mass General Law, Chapter 44, 53F and 3/4. Select Board, would you just briefly describe what we're doing with establishing this fund?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Mike Zulis, Precinct 3 Town Meeting Member, Chair of the Select Board. Mr. Moderator and everyone, this article attempts to convert our current PEG access and cable related fund from what's called a special revenue fund to an enterprise fund. And this has to do with payments that are received from the cable companies. We receive payments from the cable companies. We keep a small percentage of it. I think it's 5.25%. We pay the rest. We transfer the rest to MATV. An enterprise fund, which we're seeking to do here, allows for budgeting. It allows for us to appropriate funding based on actual and anticipated revenues. Right now, with a special revenue fund, we're not allowed to budget. We just have to, it's basically like a cash basis rather than an accrual basis. We can't budget. So if we convert this to an enterprise fund, we don't have to come in mid-year and appropriate based on the actual funding that's received. We can budget for it just like we do with the rest of our budget. So there's no way for a deficit here because we can only pay MATV what comes in. So we urge a yes vote on this article. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Seeing no members rising to speak, We'll go to the vote. This just requires a simple majority. If we could open up the poll. All those in favor of Article 43, please signify by pressing yes. Opposed, no. Press 2. Abstain, press 3. The motion carries with a positive vote of 206 yeses and 2 noes. Article 44, recommended that the town vote to appropriate $500,000 from the PEG Access Enterprise Fund for fiscal year 2024 cable-related purposes consistent with the town's franchise agreements with Comcast and Milton, Inc., and RCN Telecom Services and Mass LLC, including but not limited to support of public educational or governmental access cable television services, monitor compliance of the cable operator with the franchise agreement, or prepare for renewal of the franchise license. Does anyone wish to speak to this recommendation? Seeing no one rising, it just requires a majority vote. If we could open up the poll. The motion carries with a positive vote of 204 yes and 1 no. Mr. Zulus, just a couple comments, please.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Before we conclude, there are some people and some groups that should be acknowledged. First, the group that helped us run on time, helped us make our votes and do our votes. They were behind the scenes largely, under the guidance and leadership of Sue Galvin, our town clerk. Sue Galvin, Gail Neville, Karen Dilworth, Caitlin Neville, Amy Dexter, Paige Ippolito, Linda Napoli, Lisa Cool, and Rob Mallett, who was a one-person band on the IT. All of those people allowed us to conduct our town meeting pretty much without a hitch. So please give them a round of applause. Stay standing for just a minute on this one. I neglected to mention the custodians and the personnel of this building who helped us and cleaned up and helped us do this. Second, this has been a long and challenging town meeting, and we have been led with courtesy and professionalism and poise, and with his trademark humor by our town moderator, Bob Hiss. And finally, and most importantly, the group and the individuals who have worked tirelessly over many months to help to guide this town meeting with their recommendations. The Warrant Committee deserves to be recognized, I believe, both individually and as a group. And so I'm going to read each of their names, and then we can show our appreciation to them individually and as a group. Emily Cavalier, the Secretary, Oheni Asari, Jeremiah J. O'Connor, JJ, Steve Geister, Kristen Cosio, Tom Caldwell, Lori Connolly, Allison Gagnon, Jareem Langlace, Amanda Serio, Judith Steele, Steve Rhines, Jay Funling, and the clerk, Karen Bosworth, who made sure we saw all our amendments and we saw everything we need to do so we could vote. Please give a huge round of applause for the Warrant Committee.
Thank you very much. Article 46, recommended that the town vote to accept the provisions of Mass General Law.
Mr. Moderator, I forgot to mention the Chair, Dave Humphreys. I'm sorry. I apologize. He was at the top of the list, and I was leaving him for last. The Chair, Dave Humphreys. Please give him a big round of applause.
46, recommended that the town vote to accept the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 200A, Section 9A. Anyone have any questions or wish to speak to this article? Seeing no one rising, we'll go to the poll. We could open up the poll with the software. All those in favor of 46, it's a majority vote. Please signify by pressing yes. Opposed, no. Press 1. Abstain, press 3. Motion carries with a positive vote of 188 to 1. I'll entertain a motion to dissolve. A second. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. We're dissolved.